Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and today we're smoking brisket on the Kamado Joe Pellet Joe. So if you don't know yet, Kamado Joe, who makes fantastic ceramic charcoal grills, recently manufactured their first pellet grill, the Pellet Joe. We've been putting it through its paces, testing any and everything we can think of, and of course we've got to do a brisket on this thing. So instead of just doing this behind closed doors, we figured have the camera rolling for the entire process so you guys can see us cook our first brisket on the Pellet Joe. Now, full disclosure, about 8 hours ago, a brisket went onto the Pellet Joe. We got here super early so that we could condense this process. But we're gonna start at the beginning of this process. I'm gonna show you how we trimmed and seasoned up our brisket, then we'll jump ahead and we'll take a look at what it looks like 8 hours in. Now today we're working with a 12-pound whole packer brisket. This is the perfect size for any 18-inch grill like the Pellet Joe. We're not gonna do a ton of trimming. We're gonna leave it whole. We wanna take the fat off of the point here and just square it up a bit. You can see we got kind of a gouge in this one, and this is a pretty thin portion of the point meat, so unfortunately we're gonna lose that, but no big deal. There's not a lot of loss there. So what we're gonna do is come in here on top of this point muscle, which is where we get that fatty brisket, and we're just gonna take off this layer of fat. Some of it's really hard, some of it's less hard. We don't really need any of it because of the fat content inside the point muscle. It's gonna be plenty juicy, plenty fatty. All right, so we got the top of that point trimmed up pretty nice. You can see here on the edge of the brisket, it's just kind of gray meat. That's just something that happens in the processing part of cutting up a brisket. So we're just gonna take that gray edge right off of there. So that looks a lot better. We've got rid of that gray edge. You can see we've got a pretty good fat cap here on top of the flat where our slices come from. We're just gonna take that down to about 1/4 inch. All right, now on the opposite side, we've got this huge wedge of fat that's in between these two muscles. So we can trim that out there a bit. We're also gonna square this off, this little flap we don't need. And these two muscles, the way they sit, you can see the flat muscle sitting on the bottom, the point sits on top. So that wedge actually starts right here. So that's where we're gonna come in here and just start to get rid of some of that excessive fat. And look, as long as you're not getting into the red of the meat, then you know that you're good to go. This extra fat can just come right out. All right, we've taken enough out of there now, still a little bit left behind, but this is also gonna sit just a little bit more flat, which is nice. Feel good about this side, let's flip it over. On this side, we've got this huge chunk of fat that you can almost take out just by pulling on it. So we're just gonna trim that away. Again, another thing that just has to render during the process. So let's just go ahead and get it out of there now because we're not gonna eat it anyway. Yeah, and that's just one big hunk of fat. There's no meat in there. So no problem trimming that off. All right, you could pick at this thing all day long, but honestly, this is good to go. Now let's move on to seasoning and injection. We're gonna put together a really simple brisket rub so it's ready to go right after we inject the flat. There's just 3 ingredients in our rub today. We're doing salt, pepper, and cumin. We've got some great Telecherry peppercorns here. We're gonna grind up fresh. Now you want this kind of coarse and chunky to give a nice texture to the bark. All right, so here's how this is gonna go. We're gonna go 1 part cumin to 2 parts black pepper to 3 parts of our kosher sea salt. And then we'll just give that a shake. That's it. Now moving on to the injection. We're gonna start with a cup of beef stock. We're gonna add to that some of our prime dust, which is essentially beef stock and salt in a powdered form. It's a really concentrated beef flavor. 2 tablespoons of that, and then we'll do 1 tablespoon of our Flay Volcano smoky hot sauce. Give that a shake. Now we're gonna pour off about just a little less than a half cup of this to save to add to the wrap later. And the rest we're going to inject into the flat. So we'll load up our pistol grip injector. And then right here we have the muscle that we call the flat where our slices come out of. This is the only part that we're going to inject. And that's because it's the leaner of the two muscles. The point has plenty of fat to it, so it really doesn't need any help to be nice and juicy and moist in the end. But the flat could use a little bit of help. So we're just gonna work through here, refilling our pistol grip injector, working in a grid pattern, so just back and forth. We insert the needle, want to poke around just a little bit to create a little pocket that can fill up with that injection. Don't worry that some of it's coming out because more of it is staying in there. All right, so we're gonna make sure that the entire surface here of the brisket has got just a little bit of that injection on it so we can use it as a binder. And then we're just gonna hit that with our rub that we mixed up. It's a big old piece of meat, so it can take some seasoning, that's for sure. We'll do the same thing on this side and make sure we get the sides as well. And we might as well just utilize this stuff that's on the board. There we go. All right, that's ready to go on the grill. All right, so let's go ahead and check on that brisket that we put on early this morning. Well, our brisket's been on the Pellet Joe for about 8 hours now at 225 degrees. And for what it's worth, we're burning our contest mix of cherry and pecan pellets. We're looking for a really nice bark to be formed. Now, typically, when we get to this stage and we want to wrap our brisket, we're looking at like 165, give or take 10 degrees on the internal temperature. Not super relevant. What really is relevant is what the color is like on the outside. You can think of it kind of like a pie shell. You're trying to get a certain brownness to the outside, then you're going to cover it up with foil so it doesn't get any darker, but you continue to cook that pie, or in this case, we cook our brisket. So our internal temperature can raise up over 205 degrees, and we'll expedite that part of the cooking process by turning the grill up to 300 degrees to finish out. All right, there she is. Man, just beautiful bark. Got nice color on the outside of our brisket here. Bottom looks great. Great color, but not scorched. And that's what you're looking for. Let's get this thing wrapped up. So now while we're wrapping this up, we're also gonna add that reserved injection. Got about a half cup of it left. Probably don't need quite all of that. Yeah, we're gonna use it all up. And then we just wanna get this thing wrapped up as tight as possible. We got a little puncture there already. It's not too bad and it's not too low, so we can leave it. All right, we're gonna bump this up to 300 and let it finish out. We've put in about 12 hours on this brisket now. It's past 205 internal. It's probing really tender. We're ready to pull it off. Open this up and take a look at it. It smells incredible. I love that bit of cumin coming off of there. It's gonna be a great little taco brisket. Very little resistance when we're probing. That's really what we're looking for. Let's get this thing off of here. All right, we've got our brisket rested now. What we're gonna do is we're gonna separate these two muscles. You can see that line of fat that runs in between our flat here and our point, and we're just gonna take those apart. You don't have to do this, you can slice right through it if you like. But this it gives you the opportunity to make burn-ins if you want to, or simply just to isolate these two muscles. See, the muscle fibers, they run in different directions, so you may want to slice them accordingly. Slice that point into nice big chunks, and boy, look at that. It's still holding together, but it is fully tender. It's super juicy. Now moving over to the flat, where we get some slices out of here, out of the lean meat. Let's check this out. Boy, great smoke ring on there. I mean, it's tender. I'm slicing pretty thick. If you want to see a proper dangle, we can go a little bit thinner. Oh yeah. And those ends are so tender, they just fell right off. Just a little pop to it, not a lot of resistance. Oh man, that's built for a taco. You get a little nugget. Oh, that's where it's at. That fatty point meat just melts in your mouth. The flavorings are simple. I mean, salt, pepper, cumin, right? Kind of had tacos in mind when we went into this. I kind of usually have tacos in mind. I have to say, it's a great, clean smoke flavor. I think that the cook went really well. You know, being a first test on this Kamado Joe Pellet Joe, you don't know what you're gonna get, but overall pretty happy with it. So lessons learned on our first low and slow smoke on the Pellet Joe. I'd say stick to low and slow when you're doing low and slow. I could probably have gone without bumping that temperature up to 300 because I got a little more texture on the brisket than I wanted to. And that's just a result of that diffuser sitting underneath the grate, which is fantastic when you crank this thing up and it gets hot. I mean, when you're up at like 600 degrees, it gets hot and you're gonna want that heat off the diffuser. So make a plan and stick to it. I think this came out pretty well overall. I'm excited for the next one. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out atbbq.com for all the products featured in today's video. If you enjoyed the recipe, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to atbbq.com/thesauce. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.